Hello everybody and welcome to Harryhausen100 into the Ray Harryhausen archive. And this is a very special opportunity for ComicCon at Home to delve into legendary animator Ray Harryhausen's incredible collection. My name is Connor Heaney and I'm the collections manager for the Ray and Diana Harryhausen Foundation.
Hello, I'm John Walsh. I'm a filmmaker and I'm a trustee of the Ray and Diana Harryhausen Foundation. And I'm very excited to bring some of the secrets into the light from the Foundation's archive for you today.
Hello, I'm Vanessa Harryhausen, Ray Harryhausen's daughter. And I've got some of my dad's creatures here to introduce you to, if some of you don't know them. So we shall have fun.
Now this is very special because the creatures themselves are, your dad's legacy, and we wouldn't normally be able to bring creatures to Comic-Con because they're fairly delicate and they're very valuable. And so this is a real opportunity for us to share some of your favorites, Vanessa. You've picked out some of your favorite creatures from your father's collection. And how does it feel to be surrounded by your brothers and sisters again?
Well, it's like being at home, really, because I grew up with all these wonderful creatures. So it's lovely to see them out of their storage boxes and out for a bit of breath of fresh air. Not all of them are here, though. Gwangi's away on holiday at the moment, but we have Pinky and some other wonderful creatures here. So
this is a very special year for us because, of course, it's Ray Harryhausen's centenary. Ray would have been 100 years old this year. And the Foundation's collection, you could say, has been 100 years in the making, because even as a very young man or as a child, Ray Harryhausen was quite prolific in his design of creatures and his sketching. And of course, Vanessa, you've been there probably earlier than most, because you were on set for some of the films, and the collection that's in front of you now, it's being prepared for something very special. What can you tell us about that?
Yes, this is some of the items that will be going into the National Gallery for Scotland in Edinburgh. So this is just a small taster of what people will see in the gallery to come, and there's lots more. So hopefully people will make it. Because everybody wants to know, especially in America, what the Scottish connection between my dad and Scotland, and it was my great-great-grandfather, Mummy's great-great-grandfather, was David Livingstone the explorer, and Dad did the one and only public sculpture in Blantyre, Scotland, of David Livingstone in honour of his memory for Mummy, which I thought was a lovely tribute, and she was very touched by it all and very humbled that he would make a huge statue for in memory of Mr. Livingstone. So that's the Scottish connection is the Livingstone from my mother's side, David Livingstone, and the American side, my dad.
So Vanessa, it looks like you've got a lot of models around you there, and there's a lot of famous models, but really this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is just a small sample from your father's collection and the type of material that people are going to be able to see in our exhibition. And I'm always amazed at how much space they take up when you do get the models out, and usually they're sort of safely stored away, but when you do take them out of their boxes and line them up, how much space they take, and how much of a presence they have when you're in a room with these creations.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I feel very at home and comfortable. Obviously with my childhood, I grew up with all this, as I've said a few times, and yeah, they do take up their own space, and it's you just have to watch giving them a little bit of air room around them. But there's much more to see at the exhibition and in the future, so keep watching us.
And for people who've seen some of Ray's pieces before, because there's been good exhibitions at Oklahoma and in London, of course, and other places, this is very different, because this is, for the first time we're bringing it all together, aren't we, in a restored fashion. So you're excited that this is the biggest and the best so far?
I'm thrilled, yes, and it's always nice to see something a little bit different, and having the guys out again on display, and it's good to see it all around.
And of course, you have your favourites as well. And there was a recent poll. We did a poll, didn't we, to find out our favourite Ray Harryhausen creatures. And you have some of the ones that made it into the top 10 on your table.
I do. Who do you want me to start with first?
Well, we shouldn't have favourites in the family, should we? But yeah, I think we all actually do have favourites. So your favourite will do. We can kick off with, I think.
Well, one of them, excuse me for stretching over a minute. Oh, I don't know if you can see, and that's Pinky from Gwangi. And I used to play and cuddle this lovely elephant and creature when I was wee. Dad let me play with it, so that was a great honour.
Sadly, Pinky didn't make it into the top 10, though. So one of the star players that didn't make it into the top 10. And there's been 2 elephants in your dad's films, hasn't there? One in Gwangi and one in 20 Million Miles to Earth that fought with the Emir.
Yeah, it's, yeah, they always get killed off, the ones I like. But anyway, that's by the by. Gwangi was my number 1, obviously. And then I liked the Griffin, but they're not out at the moment. But I have some wonderful other ones here that, you know, are well known.
You've got the heroes and villains there on the table with you. Fairly an equal amount, I think, of heroes and villains.
But they actually all get on well, offset.
And of course, you've been busy with Connor because you've got a new publication out as well. What can you tell us about your work with Connor on that?
Yes. I never thought I would write a book, but I decided to do a nice light book about, you know, living with Dad and what it was like growing up in the Harryhausen household with all these incredible creatures. So it's a book about that and some funny moments and some memories from Dad's best friends, and I think people will like it.
So for people who've already bought a Ray Harryhausen book, and there's been a few, you know, there's been ones that looked at different aspects. I wrote one myself, Harryhausen, the Lost Movies. There was, of course, Richard Hollis's book on the movie posters, the brilliant movie poster book. You're looking at sort of personal aspects as well, but there is some real treasures in there that have never been seen since those films have been made. So Vanessa, your fabulous book, I'm going to be first in the queue to get you to sign one for me. Where can we order one? Where can we order it? What's your book called and where can we order it from?
Ray Harryhausen, Titan of Cinema, and I believe Amazon, and also it will be sold at the National Galleries in Edinburgh.
So if people turn up and give you a salute, will you sign the book for them?
Yes, if we're over the social distancing with the COVID-19, yes.
And now you can get starting work on your second book.
Really? The first one's terrifying enough, but we'll see how it happens anyway.
Yes, Vanessa, it was fantastic to help you with the research for your book, because how we approached this is that you selected your 100 favourite objects from your father's collection. Now, obviously, the Ray Harryhausen collection totals some 50,000 items, so there was a lot of narrowing down to do. But also, I think you were trying to reflect your dad's entire life and aspects of his life that people might not have seen before, behind the scenes material, family photographs, and you know, a real sense of who he was as a person.
And his humour.
Yes, and his sense of humour. And we had some great moments where you were discussing some of the funny times in life growing up with your mum and dad. So
what are some of the hidden treasures that we can expect in this book, Vanessa? Because there have been other books. There's been, you know, the Lost Movies books and books your father wrote himself. But there are some things that haven't been seen before. So what can you tell us about some of the secret treasures that will be revealed?
Well, I have the Minotaur's head here that Daddy actually wanted me to mount on one of the walls in one of my houses that I had, but I didn't think it was quite go with deer and stuff. But so I have that. I have Perseus's shield.
Wow, is that a big shield? Was that made of metal or was it plastic? How does that feel?
It's metal. Do you want me? I've got it just here. Do you want me to pick it up?
Oh, yes, please. I can imagine everyone now saying yes, please. So you're welcome, everyone in ComicCon. I said yes, please. So now you're getting to see it. So you can all cheer along at home when you see it.
Wow. And
Yes?
it is heavy, isn't it, Vanessa? It's a pretty weighty film prop.
Yeah, you certainly wouldn't want to drop it on your foot. Do you want to have a look at the Minotaur's head?
No thanks, no thanks. What do you think? Of course, yes, please,
yes,
absolutely,
I think
yes, yes.
so. We've got Vanessa running around everywhere here.
Yeah. Wow.
I don't think you can see, guys.
We can see it,
Your
yes.
dad like that, you see.
That's
You see it?
incredible. So yeah, Vanessa, tell us who had that lovely mask on?
It was Peter Mayhew, who had this on. There's no eye holes in it and no real breathing, so I don't know how he managed to do a couple of scenes in this, but it's light, it's fiberglass.
So when he was cast as Minotaur, it was after he was cast as Minotaur that he was chosen to be Chewbacca in Star Wars, in the original Star Wars A New Hope. So had he not been cast as Minotaur by your father, somebody else may have been cast as the 7-foot-high shaggy dog from Star Wars.
I know.
Incredible.
Right. Hard to believe that.
Well, it's incredible. Your dad's legacy with other filmmakers. You know, he cast Tom Baker in Golden Voyage of Sinbad, and that led to Tom's role as Doctor Who. So your father lit the touch papers on many people's careers, you know, and there's many, many more than just those two examples.
I know. It's amazing, really, the effect he's had on so many people and so many different walks of life. It's great.
Right. Well, tell us a bit about the process of writing the book, because I think you thought it was quite a formidable task. And when you started it, you were like, oh, how am I going to even start this? And I said to you, sort of one page at a time. And one page at a time, you're now at the end of the book. What was the experience like?
Terrifying, actually, because I didn't want anything too heavy. I wanted it from the family side, but also that fans would enjoy it and see a little bit of Dad's family life. He was quite a private man, but there's a lot of humor in it, and you get to see more of his home life in it. Some of it's quite sad, you know, but the thing that struck me was the support that I found through my grandparents, who did a lot of stuff in Dad's early life. You know, they supported him doing his early puppets and in the garage, and Granny gave him her fur coat to make a bear for the cave bear scene. And you know, it's that support and encouragement at such an early stage, you know, in his life was obviously instrumental in his career later on.
So what would your father think, do you think, that you've written a book about him and his life?
It probably, the first question I know, and I can hear it in my head, is like, I hope you haven't written anything negative. It's like, well, no, we're all human. We have our moody moments, but you know, I think he would be, hopefully he'd be pleased. I tried to do it with dignity and love and truthfulness, you know, how I saw it.
Well, he was quite a humble man as well, wasn't he? Because he sometimes used to be surprised that there was such a fan base or a following for him. And yet here we are at Comic-Con, you know, there's a great audience for this. There's a great audience for his films, the creatures. We see people wearing Harryhausen t-shirts, and of course the films have been restored beautifully. Who'd have thought? And I don't think your father would have thought in the early days that 50 years later, 60 years later, the films would still be being sold to the public.
Well, that's a real accolade, and it speaks volumes about, you know, how instrumental his films were to his fans and other followers and famous directors, and you know, who obviously saw Dad's films when they were young and that. And I think it's a tremendous legacy, and I'm very honoured to try and keep it alive. And that was one of the things that Dad wanted to do, you know, for the foundation. He wanted to keep all his creatures alive, so his fans and young children could follow their dreams and get inspiration and believe in magic.
Now, other films that were made in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s and 70s, a lot of the materials are no longer around for those films. And yet here we are amongst a plethora of leading star players that chart back some several decades. I mean, we have the Children of the Hydra's Teeth here on the front, who made it to the #1 position as the most favourite Harryhausen creature of all time in the Harryhausen100 poll. Wow, look at that.
Well, Daddy named one of them a Guscio, but I don't know which one was a Guscio.
So he kept so much. I mean, it's not surprising to us because we work within the foundation, but when I work with other film studios and other archives, as I have done recently, I'm always surprised how films that came out at the same time as your father's film, Clash of the Titans, came out in 1981. I worked on a book about the Flash Gordon film that came out in 1980, and there's virtually nothing left from those films except what the fans own. And yet here you are, all of the pieces from Clash of the Titans are here. They're in very good condition. The paperwork, the artwork, the scripts, and so on. The amazing foresight of Ray Harryhausen to keep everything. I mean, when you were growing up with him, did it strike you as unusual that your father kept things, or was it just part of the landscape?
Well, I know Mummy used to mutter in her whiskers, as she used to call it, that, oh, Ray never throws anything out. Oh, for goodness sakes, what on earth does he need that for? And like he'd save pieces in a plug for, or we might need that bolt, or we might need something else. So, you know, he did save a lot. And, you know, we wouldn't have this collection today if he didn't save and repurpose some of the skeletons and some of the other things. He never threw anything out. Everything was used and reused in something else. So there's no waste in the kids here, you know.
But sometimes, of course, that can be detrimental, and no disrespect to the great man, but Trog, one of the leading heroes from Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger, he was cannibalized to create Calibos, who we can see there on the right hand side, and yet here's Trog himself. What's the story? Have you time traveled?
Yes, I have. No, he's just here, and I've got Calibos here too. You can see Calibos. Hold on 1 second.
So your father made a replica, didn't he, of Trog after Calibos?
To preserve them, yeah. Make sure I don't excuse the movement on the screen.
Gosh.
There you go.
He looks large and he looks heavy as well, and fearsome.
It's a wooden base, and the rubber is still soft. It's still beautifully supple. So
do you think your father regretted cannibalizing the original Trog to make Calibos? That's why he then recreated Trog again. He brought him back to life as Trog Part 2.
No, I think he just thought it was just the means to an end, you know? He just needed to reuse it. So if he needed to do something else, make a new one. And that was just, you know, how it was.
It's good, though. It's good to see Trog back. And he looks, Trog looks well. But there's a fairly even split of heroes and villains here on the table. Are you drawn, would you say, more to the heroes or the villains?
Well, probably that's some of the nicer ones, but I do like the cat. I do like the saber-toothed tiger, because in my book I write about Daddy used to take me to the Brea tar pits in LA, and we used to go and have a look at that, and he got me a beautiful round necklace with a saber-toothed tiger on it, and so that was something for the Eye of the Tiger. And then we have here the baboon from Eye of the Tiger as well. He's got his little chess piece in his hand.
And he's been beautifully restored by Alan Friswell, who is your father's official conservator.
He is, and he's done such a wonderful job, and it makes me feel so at home when he's here, you know, fixing the animals and all the creatures. And it's just like, sort of, it reminds me of when Dad used to tinker and redo things or make things. So it's I feel quite, you know, at ease and peace with what he's doing. He's doing such a beautiful job, and it's thrilling to see all he's restored.
I often say it, but how do we keep Alan Friswell restored? You know, how do we preserve Alan so that he can stay with us? I'd like everyone to be frozen in a chamber deep underground like a James Bond villain would do. He's fabulous. Alan is a genius, really. And his work here, in a sense, you can't see his work unless you see the before and after pictures. And perhaps we could have a book from Alan Friswell next showing the restoration sequences. But he really has worked wonders here. And working, the difficulty is some of the compounds and chemicals are not allowed to be used in the modern day environment. So he's had to try and interpret, hasn't he, the different polymers to recreate the creatures, and everything from hair to eyeballs to skin. I mean, it's an incredible job.
I know, and he's done it so beautifully and with such thought, and really trying not to change too much of Dad's original work, but keeping it, so it all flows perfectly with it,
I'm a big fan of Clash of the Titans, and I have a lovely picture behind me of your father working with the main hero, Kraken. And you have there the full-size Kraken. If you wouldn't mind going and standing next to him, because to give us a sense of the scale, Vanessa, please.
I don't know if you can you
wow.
see? I can't see.
We can see that. That's incredible. And he's been restored, hasn't he, just especially for the exhibition?
I know, he was really in a dreadful state. I mean, honestly, chunks of him were falling off, and all his lovely claws are all now back, and his face is restored, and he's just done such a beautiful job on this, and Dad would have been thrilled to have him back as a whole piece now.
And I think this Kraken model is one of the models which Alan Friswell looked at and thought, how am I going to do this? Because it's so big. I mean, it's basically the size of a human torso and a human head. And there was so much damage on that particular piece that, it was such a huge job for Alan. And I was lucky enough to watch Alan work and to see the transformation from this fairly deteriorated model right the way through to a perfect. He does look like he could have just jumped off the screen in 1981. And there was a specific reason why the Kraken model had deteriorated so badly, and that was because of the glycerin that had been poured onto the model during that classic end sequence for Clash of the Titans, with all of the water and with Pegasus. Glycerin was poured onto the model, and that accelerated the deterioration. So here at the foundation, we're finding out new things all the time about what happens to these models after decades, how well they're preserved, and a model such as the skeletons you see in front of you, they required very, very little attention. They were not in a poor condition at all, despite the fact that they're quite a bit older than some of the other creatures on your table there, Vanessa.
Well, the glycerin was creative, wasn't it, to give it a water effect? And the same thing happened to Pegasus. Poor old Pegasus was doused in glycerin, and so he was sticky for a long time. So luckily, he's been de-stuck, which is good.
You want to get him? He's just over there.
Yes, please. Yes, please. Nobody in this room is going to say no. It's like, if I had 3 thumbs, I'd put 3 thumbs up, but that'd be creepy. Yes, please. Fanboys in the room, fanboys and fangirls in this room. I hope everyone at home who's watching this via ComicCon online and ComicCon at home is appreciating all of these fabulous pieces. Wow. I
don't know if you can see, but this is because of the glycerin damage on the wings here and there. Right. So that's the result of that. It's not that.
Yes. So this particular model has been stabilized by Alan. We have 2 Pegasus models, and one of them is in completely perfect condition, and the other has this, this damage from the glycerin. And what Alan has done with this particular piece is he's stabilized the model, he's conserved it so that no further damage will occur in years to come. But we thought it was interesting to have a record of this, because this was a result of animation. This is a result of that fantastic sequence from Clash of the Titans and the water effect that your father was trying to achieve. So we think it's brilliant to have 2 Pegasus, one that's perfect and one which has shown the effects of animation, because stop motion animation in itself does cause damage to the models. The models were built to be animated, and nobody at the time was thinking these will look wonderful in a museum in 30 or 40 years' time. So they were built to last the duration of the film. And yes, the process of animation under all those hot lights could in itself cause quite a lot of damage during filming and animation.
Hey, Vanessa, before you take it away, can we just see the rod that's coming out of Pegasus?
Can you see?
Yeah, that's the rod that would have been to the opposite side of the camera. So Pegasus would have been the other way around. The rod would have been hidden from view, and he would have been supported on a screen so that the rear projection and the blue screen work could be done. And he would be supported by that rod instead of using wires for some sequences. So incredible. And he looks fairly heavy as well there, Vanessa. Does he feel heavy?
He's pretty solid. And, you know, excuse me, I'm squeezing his butt cheeks here, but he's still, the rubber is soft. You know, it's still pretty.
Are you allowed to squeeze a horse's butt cheeks? Is that allowed in the current climate?
I'll squeeze the stomach, it's still soft.
I think that's okay, because Vanessa she's a horse fancier, isn't she? She rides horses, so I think that's probably okay.
Yeah, I think as a horse expert and as Ray Harryhausen's daughter, she is the only person that can get away with tweaking Pegasus like that. But this is one of the things that, again, Alan mentions quite regularly, and it's come up a couple of times in our conversation now. Some of the models are still incredibly supple, and you could still almost animate them now. You know, we don't animate them because we're not going to cause any damage. But Alan says quite often, theoretically, a model such as Calabos or the Hydra could still be animated because Ray built them so well.
I mean, this walrus from Eye of the Tiger. He's still soft.
Wow, he looks amazing.
I just like to see that. I'm sorry, I'm bringing out the kids because they need a bit of, you know, airtime.
That's amazing.
And you were around, Vanessa, for Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger. That was a film that you were around for, and you were on the set when they shot that film in Malta, weren't you?
Yes, I was. Yes, I can't remember. One of the guys had a bad fall in the ice and cut himself open. In fact, it wasn't ice; it was rock salt. But he was in the next scene, and it was fine. And then where they're all fighting and that with their fur coats on, they've actually got bikinis and swimwear underneath because it was so jolly hot.
Gosh, that's film people for you, isn't it? Film people would have a swimsuit and bikini on just in case.
Just in case, yes.
Just in case.
Well, the sea was just over by, so.
They shot it in the summer, of course. And behind you, just over your shoulder, we can see Minoton, which is fabulous to see the Golden Man himself. And has Minoton been restored, Connor, by Alan?
Yes, Minoton again required some pretty extensive conservation. The horns had come off, and quite a lot of his sort of armor had fallen off. So Minoton has been fully restored. Alan restored as well the paintwork on the creature to give it that sheen that he has in Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger. And yeah, I mean, Minoton again, a fantastic creature, really wonderful to be able to show that to everybody. And yet you've got a scorpion in your other hand there, Vanessa.
I was at home and Daddy had just made these, and he just finished painting them at Ilchester, and we had a patio, and he went and put them on the patio to dry because they were different colours. And a friend of mine came over for coffee, and we were sitting in the study, and the patio was straight out the double doors. You could look straight up. And she looked up from her coffee and she went, "Oh my God, are those scorpions on the patio? Are they real?" And I was like, "I hope not in London anyway." But we went out later and we saw them, and they were all drying. Daddy had just put them out to dry in the sun.
That's incredible. What an amazing, I mean, anyone would think that. My goodness, scorpions in London. Sounds like a Hammer horror film. Scorpions in London, starring Peter Cushing.
They were jolly huge because the way he had positioned them on the step, he'd staged it, I think. But that was a bit of fun. And this is quite sharp. The little
the poison pincher end. But Minoton looks really spectacular there. He just looks like he stepped out of the film from 1977. And he's a fan favorite as well. You know, there's all sorts of fan favorites, and we're going to reveal some more details of the rest of the poll, who didn't make it into the top 10, and there's some people who kind of just snuck in. just outside the top 10. So we'll reveal those a little bit later on. But how do you feel about how the top 10 went, Vanessa? Were you happy to see all of the creatures ranked, or do you feel it's a bit unfair to kind of have them ranked? Because not everyone's keen on having their greatest hits kind of chosen by the public in a preferential order.
I think it's nice to have everyone's opinion, what made it, made it for them. I think it's, you've got to be open-minded about this. I think it's interesting to see what, was the top film, really, or is the top film in people's lives. And
some of the creatures who work hard, like Pinky, and some of the other lesser well-known ones, like the homunculus is a particular favourite of mine from the Golden Voyage of Sinbad. They don't always get as much screen time, and they don't always get as much recognition, but they are a really important part of the Harryhausen universe, aren't they?
Yeah, well, they all have their little characters, and I felt sorry for the homunculus. Wrong place, wrong person to bring him to life, but
and
I think that's character.
I think that's one of the most interesting things about the poll is the reaction on social media. A lot of people thought it was unfair that we were making them choose only 3 because they have 5, 10, 20 favourite Harryhausen creatures. And looking at the results of the poll as they start to come in, every single model from all of Ray Harryhausen's films have votes, and some have just missed out, as John said, in getting into the top 10. But it's very interesting to see which creatures really imprinted themselves on people's memories. And so many people say to you, Vanessa, your father's films, they made my childhood. That your dad's films are my childhood. And I think that's what's so great about this archive, is that you can see all of these models. That it's not just pictures of the models; it's the real thing. They're all there, and you can enjoy them in person. Those very creatures that brought your imagination to life as a young child.
Yeah, and it's amazing, as I said before, the different walks of life that it affects, from artists to budding filmmakers. It's a tremendous legacy to have my dad to pass it on to the inspiration of young people and old.
Well, I was young. I was 18 when I met your father, so I rang him out of the telephone directory. I rang him up and I said, "Is that Ray Harryhausen? Can I come and make a film about your life?" And of course, he was really gracious and generous with his time, and he didn't need to be. So, even for people who weren't, I'm not an artistic animator. I'm more of a filmmaker and writer. But he took the time, and of course, it was a great friendship over the years. But he was that kind of person. He was generous with his time. He was a generous, spirited person, even in just sitting having tea and cakes. He'd always make sure you had plenty. And it's unusual because not all film people are as giving and as generous. So I think that's it's surprising to people when they hear the stories.
Yeah, I mean, I got used to, as a child growing up, of the doorbell ringing, especially in London, and somebody standing there, "Is Mr. H in? Could I see Mr. Harryhausen? We were just passing." And I'm going, "Yeah, okay, hold on 1 second." Or Mum would answer, and then she'd yell up to Dad if he was upstairs in his workroom, and she'd turn on the kettle and make a cup of tea. They'd get shown into the wee study, and like you said, he had the time. But I think people, when he was younger, like Willis O'Brien and other people, they took the time to encourage him, and I don't think he ever forgot that, because if you don't get that first encouragement, it sort of makes you just fall a bit flat. So that was very important for him, to spend whatever little time he could with the young fans or older people, and make it, and he genuinely made them feel it was important what they said, and that if they brought cards or whatever, fan mail, it was very important to him.
I'm always struck by the story of a young man who sent a mask of the Cyclops from Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. And, Ray wrote him a correspondence. They kept in touch, and he encouraged him to keep going. Of course, that young man who created the Cyclops mask was none other than Rick Baker. Yes, that Rick Baker, Mr. is it 7 or 8 Oscars later, Mr. Rick Baker, who's a great inspiration to people who come to ComicCon and other artists. And Phil Tippett, of course, who worked his magic with Empire Strikes Back, with RoboCop, with Dragon Slayer, personal favourite of mine, Willow, and so on. And of course, Jurassic Park and into the digital era as well with Starship Troopers. So, you know, Phil Tippett and Dennis Muir and these people, Randy Cook, John Landis, great friends to Ray personally and to the foundation. So we're really lucky, really, aren't we, Vanessa, to have all of these wonderful people.
Well, as Daddy said, he felt very humbled by you know, when they came and paid homage for the BAFTA and that, and they came to London. It was extraordinary. He couldn't believe it. I mean, you know, like we discussed earlier, that he genuinely thought he didn't think I guess he didn't think he was that important, but he, you know, he was just amazed that these amazing producers and directors would come and pay homage and celebrate his, you know, his life and his wonderful creations that we have here. And that's just Dad all over. He was just a very genuine, lovely man.
And all of these people contributed to your book as well. All of the people that John just mentioned have all written some of their memories for your book, which was, I mean, that was so wonderful that all of these extra perspectives alongside your own story of your father's life. I mean, I think that's going to be one of the additional interesting parts of your book.
And they all say the same thing, you know, like when Dad was on set, that he really got involved. He was a do man. He wasn't point a finger and go and do it. He was, you know, he'd make, is it Kearney with Talos? He was getting him to understand how he was falling on the sand before he got stomped on by Talos. Caroline Munro, she mentioned that Dad had an eye on a stick, you know, and tried to get it to focus. And he was always involved with the actors and everybody so that he could get that feeling and understanding from their perspectives as well as behind the camera and with his wonderful creatures.
I suppose so many people saw the films not at cinemas, but saw them on VHS and on DVD years later. So your father wouldn't be present during those screenings, clearly, you know, private home screenings. And yet that's the impact, isn't it? When people get to see the films over and over and over again. And we have to say a big thank you to Warner Brothers and Sony Pictures, who look after Ray's catalogue between them. They've done a beautiful job, fully restored. All of Ray's films have been fully restored in HD. Some of them now have been scanned in 4K. 4 of Ray's films are in 4K, including Jason and the Argonauts, The Three Worlds of Gulliver, Sinbad, The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, and First Men in the Moon. So a good start on those 4. I hope the rest will be coming in 4K very soon.
Yeah, no, and a very big thank you to, again, all the fans and people that just kept this wonderful legacy and memory alive. You know, as we said before, it's however many years it is, Dad's been doing his films and all this showing. And if it wasn't for the fans and that, you know, he could have just drifted away into the quiet background. But thank you all again for keeping his memory alive. And we celebrate his 100th birthday on the 29th.